Imagine living in a time when receiving a diagnosis of diabetes was practically a death sentence. Such was the reality before the discovery of insulin. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, diabetes was a disease that terrified patients and doctors alike. Medicine knew that diabetes caused high blood sugar levels, but did not understand why it happened or how to treat it. Patients often suffered rapid weight loss, extreme fatigue and unquenchable thirst, while their bodies, unable to process glucose, slowly began to fail. The only known treatment at the time was an extremely restrictive carbohydrate and calorie diet, which forced patients into a form of controlled starvation. Although this strategy could extend life somewhat, it was a limited and painful existence. Worse, the disease most often affected the young, especially children, who faced a tragic and cruel fate. For the physicians of the time, treating these patients was frustrating, as there was nothing really effective they could offer them. But all this was about to change, and the change would come from a man with a revolutionary idea, a physician named Frederick Banting, whose persistence and creativity would forever alter the course of medicine. One sleepless night would be the starting point of a discovery that would save millions of lives. Frederick Banting was neither a famous physician nor a leading scientist. He was, in many ways, an ordinary man with a restless mind and a deep desire to make a difference. Born in Canada in 1891, Banting began his career as a general practitioner, but was soon drawn to the world of medical research. However, he had no laboratory experience and no brilliant resume to back it up. The spark for his big idea came one night in October 1920. While reading a medical article about the pancreas, Banting was fascinated by the mention of the islets of Langerhans, small structures in the pancreas that, according to some studies, were involved in glucose metabolism. What if diabetes was nothing more than the result of the destruction of these cells? That night, Banting could not sleep. His mind was consumed by one question: could he extract something from these cells that would help treat diabetes? The next morning, Banting drafted a rudimentary plan for experimenting with the pancreas. He presented his idea to Professor John MacLeod, a researcher at the University of Toronto, who, although skeptical, agreed to give him access to his laboratory. It was then that Banting met Charles Best, a brilliant student who would become his right-hand man. Together, they formed a team determined to solve the riddle of diabetes. With an idea in mind and the help of a small team, Banting was ready to meet the challenge. But the road to discovery would not be easy. In the summer of 1921, Frederick Banting and Charles Best began their experiments in a modest laboratory at the University of Toronto. With few resources and rudimentary equipment, their mission was as ambitious as it was dangerous: to extract a substance from the pancreas that could control blood sugar levels. They worked tirelessly, performing surgery after surgery on dogs, to study how the pancreas worked. Although the first few weeks were filled with failures, Banting and Best did not give up. The turning point came when they succeeded in removing the pancreas of a diabetic dog, which raised its blood sugar levels to dangerous levels. They then prepared a crude extract of pancreas, which they called Insulin, and injected it into the dog. The results were astonishing. The animal's blood sugar level began to drop rapidly. The dog, previously weak and lethargic, regained energy and vitality. For the first time, Banting and Best saw that their idea could work. However, there was still much to be done. The extract they had created was crude and impure, and could not be administered to humans. It was then that the team received help from biochemist James Collett, who worked to purify the insulin extract and make it safe for use in people. This step was crucial, and after months of hard work, they finally had a purified version of insulin ready for testing in human patients. The first clinical trial was conducted in January 1922 on Leonard Thompson, a 14-year-old boy who was on the verge of death due to diabetes. The first initial dose had little effect, but after adjusting the formula, the second dose changed everything. Leonard regained weight, strength, and, above all, hope. The team had achieved the unthinkable. The discovery of insulin marked a before and after in medicine, but Banting's story does not end here. Now, the struggle was focused on bringing this treatment to the whole world. After the success with Leonard Thompson, Banting, Best, and the rest of the team at the University of Toronto knew they had achieved something revolutionary, but they also understood that it was only the beginning. To save lives around the world, they needed to produce insulin in large quantities and ensure its distribution to patients who desperately needed it. This was no small challenge, as purifying insulin was a complicated process, and the laboratory's facilities were not sufficient to meet the demand. It was then that Eli Lilly Pharmaceuticals, in the United States, stepped in to collaborate with large-scale production. Banting, although reluctant to get involved with corporations, understood the importance of this alliance. Thanks to Lilly's resources and expertise, significant advances were made in the production of purified insulin, making it available within a matter of years not only in North America, but also in Europe and beyond. The impact was immediate. Before insulin, type 1 diabetes was virtually a death sentence. Patients, especially children, slowly succumbed to the disease, even under strict diets that barely prolonged their lives. Now, with insulin, many could lead relatively normal lives. Parents who had lost all hope saw their children return to school and regain their strength. Physicians around the world quickly embraced the treatment, recognizing its potential to change the course of a disease that until then had been relentless. However, this success was not without controversy. Banting and his team decided not to patent the insulin to ensure that its use would be as widespread as possible. The patent was registered in the name of the University of Toronto, and the rights were sold for a symbolic $1. For Banting, insulin was not property, but a gift to humanity. As insulin transformed the lives of millions, Banting became a hero in the medical field. But the real prize, for him, was not in the accolades or public recognition, but in knowing that his work had given hope where there was none before. As insulin saved lives around the world, Frederick Banting became an iconic figure in the history of medicine. His discovery not only transformed the treatment of diabetes, but also marked a milestone in scientific collaboration and medical ethics. Banting, ever humble, never sought fame. His true purpose was to alleviate human suffering, and insulin was the tool that allowed him to do so on a scale he himself had not imagined. The impact of insulin cannot be underestimated. Before its discovery, people with type 1 diabetes faced a slow and painful death. Today, millions of people around the world are living with the disease, but thanks to insulin, they can lead active and fulfilling lives. The discovery also spurred advances in endocrinology and the development of other treatments for chronic diseases. However, Banting did not stop there. He continued his medical career by researching other areas and served his country during World War II, working on medical solutions for fighter pilots. Although he died prematurely in a plane crash in 1941, his legacy lives on. Today, a century later, insulin remains essential in the treatment of diabetes. The Nobel Prize he shared with MacLeod in 1923 was an early recognition of the importance of his discovery, but for Banting, the real prizes were the letters and testimonials from grateful patients and families. Children who once faced certain death now had the opportunity to grow, learn, and dream of a future. That was the greatest reward for him.